Hello, this is your host, Todd Lewis, for Praise of Folly podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe and hit the notification bell. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Telegram, and Facebook, and you can support the channel on local subscribe star and buy me a coffee. Today's episode is called The Great Divergence in Europe's Naval Tech Age. While we wait for people to appear, a brief introduction. The Great Divergence is the idea that in around 1500, Europe is on this upward track that catapults ahead of the rest of the world. Most people who talk about this agree that it was due to technology in some factor, oftentimes the focus on military technology, which makes a lot of sense. But I'm here to argue that that's not quite the full picture. And the more important technological edge was in seafaring technology, hence the title, The Great Divergence in Europe's Naval Tech Age. And in tonight's show, I will go into the reasons why I think the technological advances in sea power or ship design were more important for establishing this primacy than merely military advantages. So, without further ado, we shall begin. Dawn of the Colombian Age, geopolitical analysis of economic power. Halford Mackinder, in his The Geographical Pivot of History, describes the years from 1500 to 1900 as the Colombian Age, when through the use of naval technology, European powers revolutionized world trade and laid the foundation of naval strategy that the likes of Mahan and Corbett would codify. This age closes in the 20th century, where the political extends to all the corners of the world. This point of origin is also known as the Great Divergence, where European powers became the cockpit of civilization, surging ahead of older and more established empires in the Near East, Indian subcontinent, and East Asia. The European relationship to technology is often cited as a major cause of this phenomenon, whereby through superior weapons, the Europeans conquer the world. Both the left-coded Jared Diamond in his Guns, Germs, and Steel, and the right-coded Niall Ferguson in his Civilization, the West and the Rest, point to technology as a key factor, with the two differing as to the causes of this. Diamond claims geography and Ferguson culture. We can also add Victor Davis Hanson in his Carnage and Culture, focusing on European technical edge in a military sense. Of the three, Niall is more open and explicit about the impact European blue water navies had on trade and the rise of European economic power. That being said, I argue this is still not fully appreciated by academics and the populace at large. I will argue that the European technological edge in naval technology was even of greater importance than its advances in purely military technology, such as firearms and cannons. In two previous videos, geopolitical importance of the steppe until the close of the Colombian epoch and the steppe within an enclosed political space, the heartland of the 21st century, I argue that advances in firearms technology were vital in protecting Europe from the depredation of steppe nomads, in creating a sheltered population base in which a technological society could develop. I still hold to this assessment, but this does not by itself explain the Great Divergence. The reason is simple. Islamic empires, aka the gunpowder empires of the Ottoman Turks, Safavid Persians, and Mughals, possessed, as the name implies, firearms and cannons, as did East Asia in the form of the Ming and later Qing dynasties. The Turks would threaten Europe well into the 17th century. The Mughals locked India down until the early 18th century, and China's century of humiliation did not begin until the 19th century. If in the year 1500 the major Eurasian civilizations all possessed firearms, Europe possessed one thing the rest lacked: a viable blue water navy. Why is this important? Firstly, it allowed for wide-ranging commercial expeditions, and secondly, military conquest. As the latter is already well known, tonight's show will focus on the former. The explanation of the Great Divergence, naturally enough, focuses on the military application of technology, as it was through force of arms that Europe conquered much of the world, and small outnumbered forces won lopsided victories over foes who possessed superior numbers. This misses the crucial point: what are the preconditions for the creation of such weapons? Technological society must be sufficiently populous and prosperous so that it can employ enough of its population in work that is mental rather than physical, secure from external military threats, and be possessed of a political establishment rooted in the rule of law rather than executive diktat to incentivize people to invent. By 1500, Western Europe had more of these ingredients than any other of the Eurasian powers. As seen with the ancient Greeks and Phoenicians, war and commerce are closely intertwined, as soldiers and warships are needed to protect shipping, but also need to be paid by the revenues from successful trades. This was no different in the 16th century, aka the Iberian century, where Portuguese and Spanish forces secured new resources by direct applications of force in the New World, carving out vast empires, or through gunboat diplomacy and securing trade deals in South Asia and the Spice Islands. The rise of European naval power is rightly seen as decisive by Mackinder, before which time the great engine of economic growth for millennia was the Silk Road, which originated in the 2nd century BC as an initiative of the Han Dynasty in China. It began in the ancient capital city of Imperial China, Luoyang, in the east and ended at the Mediterranean port of Antioch in the west. There was also a corresponding maritime branch of the Silk Road that linked China to the East Indies, South Asia, and the Near East. The Maritime Silk Road originated in Guangzhou, modern Canton, in the east, and ended in Petra in the west. From the 2nd century BC till the 16th century AD, the Silk Road had highs and lows corresponding to the rise and fall of great Eurasian empires to create a security commons for trade to occur, with major growth periods corresponding with the Han, Kushan, Parthian, and Roman empires, then the Byzantine, Sasanian, and Tang empires, then the Abbasid and Tang empires, and finally the Mongol Empire that united Eurasia. When one or more of these empires faltered, the trade routes fell into disrepair. It cannot be stated enough that the vast majority of world trade was carried by the Silk Road proper and the Maritime Silk Road over this 2 millennia period. This has several advantages for Asian powers. Firstly, they got to play the middleman and charge tolls at each juncture. Secondly, the merchants got to mark up their goods at each new empire as they are the only supplier. Thirdly, this is all taxed. The Ottoman Empire, for example, serving as the retailer in this scenario, can mark up Asian goods to European markets. The European buyer was the Venetians, who did the same. In the 15th and 16th centuries, the Portuguese, and later the Dutch, and finally the British in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries bought wholesale straight from the dealer, cutting out the middlemen of the Asian empires in Venice. The overall effect was catastrophic for Central Asia, already racked by war after the collapse of the Mongol Empire and the rise of Timur, sank into irreversible decline and poverty. Then the great empires of Asia, having lost control of the transportation of trade goods, lost revenue and sunk into decline. Increasingly, European merchants rerouted trade directly to Europe, sinking Mackinder's heartland into poverty and oblivion. The technological revolution that allowed for European powers to engage in blue water operations for both commercial and military reasons was a merger of 2 maritime traditions. The North Sea tradition of deep-hulled ships, such as the cog, from Norse and Hanseatic medieval traditions of trade and exploration, and the Mediterranean traditions of sail construction from the Doe of Saracen origin. 2 ships emerged from this union of technical traditions, the caravel and the carrack. The caravel was the smaller ship with a length of 20 to 30 meters, a shallow draft, and a forecastle or sterncastle, 2 or 3 masts with a lateen triangular sails. Quick and agile, a crew of 20 to 30. The caravel was ideal for exploration and operations in littoral regions. The carrack was 45 meters long, displaced 1,000 tons, had a deep draft, had a high stern castle and high forecastle, utilized 3 to 4 masts, a hybrid rig of square sails on the foremast and mainmast, and a lateen sail on the mizzenmast, and if applicable, the 4th Bonaventure mast. Trades agility and speed for endurance, crew of 200, large storage for trade, excels in blue water operations. Further development would include the purpose-built warship, the galleon. With caravel, carrack, and galleon, the Iberian powers revolutionized the world. 3 key innovations were merged to produce the caravel and carrack. The hull design from the North Sea in the form of the medieval cog, which represents a shift from the overlapping planks of Norse longships to a skeleton-based design, which provide watertight performance on the sea and larger hulls. The triangular lateen sail derived from the Arabic dull, which allowed for better windward performance, and the traditional square sail of European ships. This allowed for long-distance travel and optimal performance under all weather conditions. Like the Romans of old, who incorporated techniques from the entire Mediterranean into their military and engineering traditions, the Portuguese did something similar in ship design in the 15th century. This allowed for the Great Economic Revolution, which allowed Europe to fuel the scientific revolution and simultaneously drain Asia of goods, reducing her kingdoms to rump states by the 19th century. Two great discoveries propelled Europe to this position: the discovery of the New World by Christopher Columbus and the rounding of the Cape of Good Hope by Bartholomew Diaz. This allowed for the exploitation of new resources in the Americas and indirectly undermined the Silk Road by purchasing goods wholesale and in larger quantities than could be done previously from Asian ports. What this further represents is that if a nation is to be a great power, it must control its own trade. If you do not haul your own goods, you cannot tax them. Cromwell laid the foundation for English dominance with the Navigation Act in 1650-51, which laid down the principle that goods ought to be transported by English ships into English ports. We can see what happened when empires lose control of its trade and concomitant taxable revenue when in 1082 the Byzantine Empire allowed Venetian ships to trade in their waters without being taxed. By rerouting trade from Central Asia, Iran, and Syria through the Indian Ocean and South China Sea via Portuguese shipping, the great empires lost vast amount of taxable revenue. This would over time turn Central Asia into the desert wasteland that it currently is. Yet this is only part of the picture. Bad enough as it is, through superior shipping, the Portuguese and later Dutch and English traders were able to haul far greater loads than were possible on land. Using a table produced by Grok, we shall break this down. We have 3 columns and 6 rows. So let's look at column 1, aspect, tonnage, annual tonnage, trade-focused logistics, economic impact, decline tracking. Column 2, the Silk Road, peak centuries, 1st to 14th. And then column 3, European maritime, age of sail, 15th to 19th centuries. Tonnage, low, 130 tons of silk to Rome, total luxuries, less than 500 tons empire-wide. The empire, I believe, is Rome here. European age of sail, high, 2,000 to 3,500 tons of spices alone in the 16th century. Greater than 10,000 tons total Euro-Asian by 17th century. Trade focus, Silk Road, high value, low volume, silk, spices via caravans, relay system. Age of sail, high volume bulk, spices, metals, direct ship hauls. Logistics, constrained, 2 to 50 tons per caravan, high costs and risks. Europe, scalable, 500 to 1,000 tons per ship, lower costs. Economic impact, Silk Road, boosted inland cities, e.g. plus urbanization pre-1500. Age of sail, shifted wealth to coast, globalized markets. Decline tracking, Silk Road, volume peaked under empires, Tang, Mongol, fell post 15th century as sea routes captured trade. City population declined 5 to 14% per border, with overland revenue vanishing by 1800. Tonnages grew exponentially, age of sail, eroding, bypassing Central Asia, e.g. spice monopoly shifted fully to sea by 1600s. By the 18th century, there was a 70 to 90% drop in overland Euro-Asian trade volume. Silk Road caravans could haul anywhere from 2 to 50 tons per trip, limited by the number of camels they brought with them, with the camels being able to carry anywhere from 440 to 1,100 pounds of goods each. A Portuguese carrack could carry 500 to 1,000 tons per ship. This means a Portuguese fleet could carry anywhere from 5,000 to 20,000 tons of trade goods. This is orders of magnitude greater capacity than camels. A single Portuguese carrack could carry 10 times the Silk Road. A fleet of carracks 400 times the Silk Road. This increased level of cargo capacity allowed European traders to undercut prices for purchase of trade goods, but also diversified the number of goods that could be transported. These numbers are staggering. Not only is the trade rerouted and tax revenue lost, the total tonnage of goods being transported is orders of magnitude greater. When trade volume is low, there is economic pressure to prioritize high-value trade goods, aka luxuries. While profitable, this does not directly lead to the kinds of resources needed for building state power. When the trade volume is high, one can begin to transport foodstuffs and raw materials in bulk. Central Asia and the littoral regions of Asia were not able to adapt to this rate of change and fell further and further behind the European powers. This engine of economic activity, when looked at over the centuries, formed a powerful drain on Asian power that eventually led to total European hegemony in the 19th century. While 15th and 16th century Europeans didn't have a highly developed sense of geopolitical strategy, the Portuguese under Vasco da Gama did intend to undercut the Ottoman Empire by sailing around the Cape of Good Hope to procure wholesale prices and bulk purchases of Oriental commodities, undercutting the Turkish middlemen. This can be seen as an economic decision rather than an integrated geostrategic policy, like modern China's Belt and Road Initiative, which seeks to reverse the trends established by the Colombian age. Nevertheless, it did have a strategic impact on Asia and shows the decisive geopolitical impact of soft power, even if not fully appreciated by the nations involved at the time. For example, the Portuguese didn't wake up one day and say, let's destroy Samarkand and Bukhara. Yet without a direct attack on either city, they and later the Dutch would do just that. Those cities and kingdoms along the Silk Road were powerless to stop this change. You could only watch helplessly as wealth trickled away. That this occurred right after years of bloody warfare under the warlord Tamerlane only made matters worse. Exhausted from brutal warfare, these Central Asian cities lacked the resources to repair the damage. If we shift to the value of imports to Europe proper from 1400 to 1700, we see this picture. This table is generated by Kroc. So we have 4 columns and 7 rows. Year, column 1, spice tonnage, column 2, aggregate shipping tonnage, column 3, and column 4, global trade impact. And then rows 2 to 7 are years, 1400, 1500, 1510, 1520, 1600, 1700. Okay, 1400. 573 tons of spices. Pepper, 313 tons. General spices, 123. And then other goods, 137 via the Levant. Total aggregate shipping was 20,000 tons, Mediterranean, stable, low, global. And then global impact, limited to overland Silk Road, low volumes, European demand met via intermediaries. 1,500, 1,469 tons, 25,000 quintals, early Cape route. Aggregate shipping, 28,000 tons, 20 voyages, 400 tons, plus the Mediterranean. Discovery of the Cape route initiates direct access, spice volume double pre-1500 levels, undercutting the Silk Road. 1510, spice tons 2,350, 400,000 quintals, peak Portuguese. Aggregate shipping tonnage 30,000 tons, growth in early fleets. Portuguese monopoly floods markets, oversupply crashes prices, but tonnage surges. Pre-1500. 1520, spice tonnage 1,116, 19,000 quintals, post-peak decline. Aggregate shipping tonnage 32,000 tons. Global impact. Volatility from oversupply wars, global competition begins shifting to re-exports. 1600, total spice tons 25,500, estimated 2.3% PA growth on a 1550 base. Aggregate shipping tonnage 58,000, 96 voyages times 400 tons plus base. Dutch, English entry scales Asian trade. Atlantic goods, e.g. silver, sugar, total 3 times 1,500 levels. 1,700, spice tonnage, 10 to 15,000 tons, decline in spices shift to bulk. Total tonnage, 86,000, 166 voyage times 400 tons plus base. Effect, diversification to tea, textiles, coffee, global empires, integrate markets. 4 times 1,500 tonnage, eroding overland entirely. This table shows us that prior to the European powers possessing blue water navies, total tonnage of shipped goods was rather low in 1400 at 20,000 tons annually. By 1700, including imports from the Americas and Asia, there was more than a 4-fold increase in imports at 86,000 tons. At the beginning of this period, the trade volume was low and was oriented towards luxury, such as spices. As volume of trade and carrying capacity of shipping increase, imports are diversified. This was the conduit by which the riches of the world entered into Europe. No non-European power had such a logistical base from which to transport goods, rendering these powers hard-pressed to keep up with European economic growth growth, which fueled military and technological development. To summarize everything up, the key thesis is that the crucial tech edge that Europeans had was in shipping rather than firearms, as Islamic and Chinese states possessed the former but not the latter. The combination of North Sea and Arabic shipbuilding building traditions merging the square sail and skeleton-based hull design with the triangular sail made blue water navies possible, achieving peak 15th century performance at sea. When the Portuguese began the process of wholesale purchase of trade goods from the east, they initiated a trend that would dry up the Silk Road. With higher tonnages allowing for higher volumes of trade, Europeans could buy in bulk, which lowered the unit price of the trade good. A Portuguese merchant fleet could carry 400 times the Silk Road. European naval imports rose 4.5 times from 14 to 1700. With Europe in control of such vast wealth being transported over sea, rival empires couldn't compete. This would then fuel technological growth and eventually the Industrial Revolution that would allow for complete European hegemony in the 19th and 20th centuries. This highlights the massive geopolitical effects of the application of soft power over time. We have Boris Negrosaro. The Portuguese were pioneers. They were dissident knight. Hello. Let's see, Sumiso Blaine. And for a set of reasons, the West has gone backwards and is switching places, especially Europe. Yeah. What the rise of America is much like the same as the rise of Europe. After World War II, the United States dominated shipping and was able to bring stuff into the world. But now China's challenging the U.S. on the shipping front. The amount of ships China can produce for commercial trade vessels is orders of magnitude larger than the United States, which is stunning when you think about it. But again, that's where global power is right now. And the United States just chose to fall asleep at the wheel. Europe Europe got destroyed by 2 world wars, so that's a little more understandable why they lost the edge in trade. But this is also why I think Mackinder might have overvalued the heartland. You're not going to have railroads in Central Asia until the USSR of any quantity that could move large bodies of troops for invasion, such as when the Soviets invaded Manchuria in August of 1945. So they could, and it was radically poor because of the redirection of trade. So that doesn't really. He, I think, overestimated what the heartland could do, and then also these trade ports in China, India, and the Indies correspond to Spikeman's rimland, which actually puts them more in the driver's seat. But yeah, there's a lot to chew on, and also if anybody wants to, I will, after the show is up, pin as a comment the link to my X where Grok created these tables, so anybody can look at them for themselves as well. It's Todd Lewis, Price of Flight Podcast, signing off.